What we often see driving greenwashing is not necessarily organisations sitting down and saying, how can we mislead consumers? Often you might see an overexcited marketing team who are really proud of something that the organisation has done, who acts, I think, with the best will in the world, spotlight it, ignoring the other stuff that the organisation does.
Hello everyone, welcome to Green.io, the podcast for responsible technologists building a greener digital world, one bite at a time. On Green.io, we explore how to reduce the environmental impact of our digital world. Our guests from across the globe share insights, tools, and alternative approaches, enabling people within the tech sector and beyond to boost digital sustainability. Hey boss, could we display our green hoster on our website? Well, not sure, I'm afraid of greenwashing. Hey boss, could we train our people in eco-design without bragging about it? Well, not sure, I'm afraid of being accused of greenwashing. Hey boss, could we have a greener business travel policy? Well, not sure, I'm afraid of being labelled a green picker. Hey boss, will I ever get you green light on something? Well, not sure, I don't want to be accused of green lighting. Sounds familiar? Legal departments and top managers are growing concerned about communication on their environmental achievements and beyond on ESG topics. The growing pressure from activists make them afraid of backlash. Plus, new regulations are out in France, in the UK with the Green Claims Code, soon in the European Union with its Green Claims Directive under construction, and maybe in the US with the FTC Green Guides being under revision. It makes companies cautious. For instance, Eni, the Italian oil company, was recently fined €5 million for greenwashing attempts. Tech companies and IT departments are not immune to this recent shyness. How to communicate well about achievements when it covers only a fraction of the company's environmental footprint. How to motivate our stakeholders without being labeled greenwashers. To answer these questions, I've asked two renowned experts on greenwashing to join us, Harriet Kingaby and Mathieu Jahnich. I met Harriet via the Climate Action Tech community, once again. She's based in London and she has been the co-chair of the Conscious Advertising Network for more than 5 years. That's the media side of the coin. But she is also now the head of ACT Climate Labs, a project powered by Media Bounty, which aims to improve the communication on climate change. That's a tooling up the movement side on the coin. And I discovered she used to hold a position as a sustainability strategist in 2012. Yes, 10 years ago, that was not common. Kudos for this. Mathieu is based in Paris. If you don't know where to find him, try LinkedIn. This is where we met. He spends quite a lot of time there, busting false green claims and educating people via his straight-to-the-point posts and comments. Since he has graduated with a PhD in didactic and communication for science and techniques, he spent the following 25 years combining research and action as a consultant, focusing these last years almost 100% on responsible communication. Welcome, Harriet. Welcome, Mathieu. Thanks a lot for joining Green.io today.
Thank you, Gaël.
Thank you for having us.
So, to set the stage, I'd like to ask you my usual question. How did you become interested in sustainability? Did you experience some kind of light bulb moment?
So we were at school, we were a class of kids who weren't particularly well behaved, I have to say. And we had one of our science teachers was obsessed with climate change. And we worked out as a kind of collective of 30 kids that the only way to derail a lesson and to not have to do our science work was to get him talking about climate change. And I guess the flip side of that was that he was absolutely fascinating and he was so passionate about it. It made me really interested in the topic. And I ended up studying environmental science at university. And spoiler, I am not very good at the science side, but I can talk about it. So from there, it through kind of doing some technical jobs and working that out, and then being pinched by the PR team because I could actually talk about some of the science behind what we were trying to do. I've ended up here, and I'm forever grateful to Mr. Brown, my chemistry teacher, for that.
You just need one teacher to change the world, huh? That's a very good story. And what about you, Mathieu?
Well, it was like an opportunity. I was sensitive to environmental issues because mostly when I was young, I spent a lot of time in doing outdoor sports. I was very keen in doing sciences, and so that was my studies in hard sciences. And then I've read some kind of research paper talking about how the media are talking about environmental issues. And I said, wow, that's very cool. It seems something to be relevant and to be useful for society. And I would like to do that. And I applied to have funds, and so I could do my PhD on those subjects. So that's how I became focused on this matter of environmental communications.
So it has been since your PhD, so 20 years ago, that you care about environmental communication.
Yeah, nearly 25 years ago. Yeah.
I was trying to be a good host here. But okay, let's go for the hard truth, 25. So I'd like to see the opportunity to have both of you here to ask you some clarifying question. And maybe my first and most obvious one is, what is greenwashing and all the other subspaces which appeared recently? Maybe, Harriet, could you shed some highlights on all these new terms?
Yeah, of course. So there's quite a few different ways of defining greenwashing. And there's lots of different frameworks that actually you can use to look at. But there's some particularly egregious practices that we see very, very commonly. So actually, it's less common than you think to see just lies out there in the world. What we often see driving greenwashing is not necessarily organisations sitting down and saying, how can we mislead consumers, although there is definitely that. Often you might see an overexcited marketing team who are really proud of something that the organisation had done, who I think with the best will in the world, spotlight it, ignoring the other stuff that the organisation does. So think of an airline company, for example, kind of talking about their vegan meals. And the problem is with even these kind of quite innocent, well, I say innocent, this is not innocent, but these kind of well-meaning things, is that they mislead consumers. And that's the heart of this. And Mathieu, I know you've got very strong opinions about it. So things like, spotlighting issues that aren't that relevant, things like shifting blame onto the consumer. Now that's a very measured one. Think about Coca-Cola telling you their bottles are recyclable, but actually not doing anything about, reducing the plastic bottles that they produce. You gave examples within your introduction, Gaël, where actually organisations don't talk about all the good stuff that they do, or they, because they actually, they're afraid, and they're missing out on an opportunity not only to normalise the fact that organisations are kind of, a lot of organisations are considering kind of sustainability, but also to talk to consumers about ways that they can better. So at the core of this all is kind of actually organisations talking about these issues in a way that's not helpful, that doesn't move, doesn't enable consumer behaviour change, doesn't change the behaviour of the organisations themselves, and is confusing and misleading. And the EU, kind of in updating their green claims quite recently, found, I think, that 40% of green claims are completely unfounded, use vague and misleading language. I mean, that's a huge one that we'll get into in a little bit. And so what's happening is actually this is not helping the cause. Consumers are overwhelmed. They're stressed out when they try and make these choices. And, frankly, as marketers, we've got to do a lot better.
That's crystal clear. And fun fact, I didn't know that green lighting existed. I made it as a joke. Give the
no, it exists. Yeah.
Okay, so that's excellent. So I'm clever than I thought. Okay, but I'm luckier than I thought. But well, thanks a lot, Harriet, because wow, quite a lot of definition and concept. And Mathieu, she mentioned that you've got strong opinion on it as well. Could you share it with us, please?
Yeah, well, I'm talking with brands, whether CSR teams or marketing or communications team or even the legal department. I'm defining greenwashing as any message that may mislead the public about the true ecological quality of a product or service, or about the reality of the company's sustainable development policies and approach. So greenwashing is something that could be relevant at the product or service level or at the corporate level. And then, yes, you have different ways of falling into this trap. And Harriet gave a number of examples. And so this can be something very tricky. And I just try to make sure that these people understand that it's a matter of, do the public will be able to understand the quality of my product or my CSR strategy, or do I mislead or give false information or not quite clear proofs, etc.
Mathieu, do you follow here? I found this article, so there's several of them who wrote it in European Environmental, I think it's Environmental Science Europe, from the Freites, Neto, Sobral, and the other one, I need to check my notes, I must admit, Ribeiro. But anyway, they were explaining that they did a systemic review and they made a distinction between company level greenwashing and product level greenwashing, and they also made a sub-distinction between executional and claim. Is it a framework that you use somehow as well?
Not really. Well, of course, we are talking about that because sometimes companies are asking for my advice regarding sustainability claims related to a product, and sometimes it's about the whole CSR strategy. But I believe that they have to understand the philosophy of the issue regarding greenwashing, and that is, do I give enough information, and am I clear enough about what I do and what are the characteristics of my products and services and my strategy. And I try not to be too complicated about definitions, about categories, you see, but to take examples and to make them better understand why people could react like this or like that in reading their contents. And it could be texts or images, of course, and both. So I try to leave a posture that could be too analytic to go to something more practical.
And could you give us one example, and I will ask Harriet to share another one after, about good practices? Like you said, you need to give the consumer the right information, the good information, not to mislead them. But how do you do that?
So, in my opinion, and the first point I would like to say is that it's really important to give good examples, because it's more easy to critique and to do this is not good and this is misleading and you should not have written this like that, etc. But it's important to show good, inspiring examples. But that doesn't mean that the company itself is green. It's just that this particular campaign or this particular message is well written, and it's interesting to see both creativity and the respect of deontological and of course about the law. And so some examples. It's also a kind of posture of communication. When I read the content, the LinkedIn post, for example, I can understand that the company has understood the ecological issues as a whole, and the company is not only focusing on climate, for example, and on climate they are not talking about neutrality, etc. And some good example in the tech sector, if I'm sure you know about Infomaniac. Something that is interesting is that they've got an environmental page. The title is "We Pollute." Yes, we know our activity is polluting, and what do we do to reduce that? And so they're not trying to hide the fact that maybe they are compensating, or even that's why they do. But you see, so that's interesting. In another sector, in the apparel sector, a brand called Organic Basics. If you go to their environmental report or CSR report, they are talking about, there's a chapter about our fuck-ups. And that's something very interesting, in my opinion, because they are okay to talk about what they wanted to do and what they failed to do, about some goals they had that was not relevant to have those goals, such as a goal of neutrality. Now they are saying, no, it was not a good idea, and now we will be talking about the reduction of our carbon footprint, for example.
And what is interesting with this example is, so it's kind of, I don't know if it will be the case for the entire episode, but I'm pretty sure you pick organic basics from the entire CSR strategy, but actually in the tech sector, and especially in the sustainable design sector.
They've got their website.
They're pretty famous for their website.
Very good. Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't know if
that was done on purpose.
Is working.
Okay.
No.
Excellent.
No, because they're very good, and that's interesting because they are talking about what they do in a way that is original. And they are trying to propose a new e-commerce website, and that's very good.
I think they try to be very consistent, and I guess, because I'm not an expert in communication, that's something very important. Maybe Harriet, do you want to comment on it and also share some positive examples? It's way easier for people to understand.
Yeah, I completely agree. Let's talk about what's good. I mean, it's not in the tech sector, but I do think that Oatly, with their, and excuse this, but their Fuck Oatly campaign, are really, really interesting in terms of the way that they are radically transparent about what their fuck ups have been, essentially, and where they've got things wrong, and where there's either been a backlash where consumers have felt misled. And what's interesting about, I think, Oatly's consumers is that they are vocal. They are probably way more switched on to kind of environmental issues than your average. But and I think that's can be where some of the fear comes from when organisations are trying to talk about their green credentials, is that they go, oh my gosh, there could be a backlash, and you will always have people who are super critical. That's the nature of passion. But what Oatly have done is they've really owned that. They've listed their failures, and they've said, look, this is how we've learned in response. And here, by the way, here's some of the press, and here's some of the comments that we've received, so that you know what we've talked about. And I think things like that, the brand are very, very good at being honest, talking, and turning that into a real virtue. And I just think it's very, very good. And I think if more organisations were honest about their mistakes, then kind of address them in that way head on, then I think we could have a much more mature conversation, because also people could learn from others. On a much more kind of subtle note, there is a really great example recently of Samsung in their washing machines range using using the legal kind of status of their kind of the energy consumption of a particular product to talk about kind of why that product was actually kind of that product had a benefit to consumers and was environmental. So the organization leaned into the really high rating of their washing machine, and actually used that to make a green claim about how this could help consumers. And I think from not from a fancy, we're a super environmental leader kind of way, but we've got a claim here that's factually correct, that looks at the usage, the full usage cycle of the product, and is kind of beneficial to consumers. I think that's a really, really good example. So you don't have to be a super ethical brand, and you don't have to be doing something that's completely beyond the pale to make a really good, solid green claim that consumers can really kind of see the benefit of.
Yeah, makes crystal clear. Actually, I wanted to ask you the questions a bit later, but it's so fascinating that I'd like to ask you if you would be okay to work pro bono for non-existing company today. But I would love to give you 2-3 cases where I've been struggling with the people I was working with on how we should or we should not communicate. And of course, it's mostly examples coming from the tech sector. But I guess you can you can apply it to all sectors. Would you be okay to be our advisors today?
Let's do it.
Yeah, sure.
So a very easy one to start, to warm up, is I want to put something on my website claiming that I've got a low carbon website. Unfortunately, sometimes people, they use a green website. And actually, that's the case. You can, I don't know, use the World Grain website, a carbon website estimator, or the greenit.fr ratings, and you've got a good rating. So that's an honest claim, okay? The problem is your IT department, you're in the transport sector, for instance, and the IT department is something like 5%, maybe 10% of the entire, no, not even 10, but something like 5% of the entire greenhouse gas emissions of your company, scope 1, 2, 3 included. What would you advise the company to do? Should they put the label? Should they don't? Should they put it but with a specific way to communicate that, they know that it's not like the main emissions, but still they're doing some efforts? What would be your advice? Both of you, maybe starting with Mathieu.
My advice would like to, if you have somewhere where I can understand what is your strategy to lower your impact regarding climate change and also other impacts, okay? Because unfortunately, climate change is not the only ecological issues we are facing. Then this claim regarding the low impact website is interesting because it's true and because every single act counts. So the idea is to put this information in comparison with the whole strategy, and that we understand as visitors of your website or as clients of this company that this is not your main action to reduce your impact, and that you are clear about that.
Order of magnitude are explained.
Yeah, it cannot be the only element regarding your CSR strategy, but if it's one element among others, and that we do understand that the majority of impacts are elsewhere, then it's okay to put it on your website.
Okay. Harriet, do you want to add something?
So yeah, I would say that what Mathieu said, obviously, and then adding that extra element of your audience on there, because obviously, as from when you learn your kind of skills as marketers, you always start with your audience. So I would say, all of what Mathieu said, but also tailored and adding value to your audience. So whether your audience is a stakeholder, whether it's a kind of B2B customer, or whether it's a consumer, so that they can understand exactly what is being said, exactly what the benefit is, not only to the kind of the wider environment, but also to themselves. Because I think it's very, very important that when we're communicating all of this stuff, we have that theory, that structure right, but we don't forget what we've been taught in marketing. We don't forget to add value for the audience we're talking to.
That's very interesting that you mentioned the audience, because actually that connects with my second use cases, which happens quite a lot. You're a startup, maybe a scale-up, but you're not that big, in the tech sector, and you don't have that much leverage. All your tech stack is on AWS, Google Cloud, or whatever. You do what you can, but you're in this kind of growth mode, etc. We could discuss a lot about the growth mode of the tech sector, but that's not the point here today. Anyway, there is this huge challenge of employer branding and committing your employee beyond just what your startup is trying to achieve. And being very sincere, you've got the HR, the lead, who comes back to you and say, well, we've run all this training or this awareness workshop, like, the digital collage, the climate fresk, etc. We've been truly committed to that because 100% of our employees have followed these workshops. We allow them some time also to volunteer, whatever, etc. I need to be more vocal about it because I need to strengthen my employer branding. I need to attract younger people, more engaged people, etc., etc. What should I do? Because that's pretty much the only stuff that you've done, at least as a CTO, raising awareness. You don't have that much time or that much money or that much leverage on reducing the rest of your carbon footprint.
So, to be honest with you, the best ideas for how to make your organization more sustainable are going to come from people who are specialists, who are working in these impact areas. And I think a lot of organizations miss a trick because they have a couple of people who work on the sustainability of the organization and they don't leverage that incredible hive mind. So what I would always suggest is that there's there's two sides to this. The first of which is that if organizations, particularly tech organizations who are so innovative, aren't using that innovation lens to kind of get these better ideas from employees and create networks of people within their organization who are making suggestions and making things better, then they're missing a trick. So that's number one. But that then spills over into your kind of employer branding, as you said, because you have really beautiful, credible, kind of stories and and lots of advocates within the organization, who can kind of do your work for you. So yes, you can have something that says, yes, kind of this is what we do. And as long as that plan is credible and it is, kind of backed up and there's a strategy behind it and it deals with your main impacts, then actually what happens is, you start to have points where if the potential employee starts to ask at interview stage, well, what actually do you do around sustainability? You might have an advocate in the room. And one of the interviewers, someone in the room might be able to just say, hey, actually we're doing this thing, I've suggested this thing, or I'm starting this initiative, and it starts to pay dividends. So I think it's not just a communications thing here. It's about, how you foster those networks of innovation within a company.
Yeah, for sure. So you would be pretty open communicating that that's a first step, and we can communicate about it, not being at risk of being labeled, I don't know, green something.
I think just to add to that, because in the conscious advertising network, there's a lot of kind of culture change, behavior change that comes along with a lot of what we do. And, for those that don't know, we've written these manifestos that give, kind of advertisers, CSR departments, etc., kind of a plan for how to make their advertising more in line with human rights and solving climate change. So you've got the guidance there, but we found the most effective, kind of organizations within our membership group have actually kind of created these kind of cross-department working groups, that are looking at how they implement these, these strategies. So yes, as an absolute first kind of port of call, I think it's worth doing a sense check of kind of, I guess, what you're doing. Kind of whether the strategy or the communications that, are going externally do match up, because it is so important that what's being said and what's being done are matching up. And that will make it so much easier to make really credible green claims and to do this stuff well.
And so, Mathieu, would you put some pictures of these workshops, climate fresk, whatever, etc., on the website or on the sustainability strategy page, for instance?
My first reaction to this case would be that I don't quite see how a company could organize training and workshops without changing and thinking about a CSR strategy, even if it's at the beginning. And so I'm sure that a startup that would organize all those training sessions, just like Harriet said, some people would say we have to continue and to work together, and we have to do things about transportation, about our business model, so I'm sure there would be other things to talk about more than only the HR activities. You understand? And so in my opinion, it's always good to talk about what you do. The idea is not to let the people think that this will save the planet or that is making you a green company. So it's to talk at the level of what you are doing and what are the values created, what are the lowering of the impacts on the environmental or social or societal issues. And so my answer is yes. All will be in the words that you will use to talk about that.
Yeah, context and in order of magnitude, basically, like in a bit of humility. I can, if I can read between the lines. Okay.
Yeah, that's the key. Yeah.
Okay, that was rooted in reality for me, and I'm pretty sure for a lot of the people listening. Before we jump on the last part of this interview and we talk a bit about legals, yeah, I'd like to grant you a treat, which is, do you want to share your worst case? Because we said we started with positive examples, and that's definitely what we should do. But if you've got to pick only one massive greenwashing advertising or claims or whatever, what will be your champion?
Okay. Can I take two lenses on this? So my first, I think what we haven't talked about, and I'll just chuck this in here, is that as well as the kind of greenwashing that organizations might do, intentionally or inadvertently within the creative of their kind of communications. I mean, my specialty is advertising, so I'm going to talk from that angle. There is also the issue of when organizations don't think about climate and other forms of kind of environmental misinformation in their media strategies. So to give a bit of background, advertising essentially funds our media. So funds the cat videos that we watch on the way to work, also funds our newspapers. And the, kind of when we only think about the content of our, kind of in this case, advertising, we're missing a trick. So what we often see is we will have organizations with a real kind of like, amazing environmental kind of, amazing CSR strategies. And we will see them inadvertently funding climate denial content or anti-science content on, online usually, or occasionally on television. And so the worst things I've seen are, brands such as, and I'm so sorry to name you guys, but Lush and Ecosia, on things like, kind of climate, kind of climate change as a hoax online. And I think this is a risk that we haven't necessarily talked a lot about yet. And it's not greenwashing per se, but it's, just a kind of institutional failure to think about, kind of this what we call a disinformation economy. Because it's also, this kind of horrendous content out there that's being produced deliberately to confuse people, deliberately to mislead them as well. So as organizations, when we're thinking about how we tackle greenwashing, we should think about the wider context of mis and disinformation as well. And then just in terms of advertisements, I think that the recent ASA ruling in the UK around HSBC was really, really, it's a real kind of warning shot for high carbon organizations and organizations that invest really strongly in the fossil fuel economy. This was essentially kind of HSBC spotlighting its kind of sustainability credentials and what it invests in, whilst simultaneously investing hugely in kind of fossil fuel projects. And the ASA specifically called them out for that. And I think that it is just everything that is wrong with that worst kind of greenwashing, where a brand essentially launders its reputation by spotlighting something whilst having this incredibly profound and kind of impact on the planet we live in and on the people that live on it. So those are the two for me.
So Mathieu, you've got the right to share your two favorites as well. And the HSBC case is very interesting. I've seen it as well, and I really wonder how we will develop in France as well, because we do have the same issue with banks, and actually with, I guess, very honestly, with teams in banks that are 100% sure that they are doing everything they could to save the planet, and a few folks next door or in the next building doing the absolute opposite, and they don't talk to each other. It's a big organization, so they stand on their feet, both of them. They're pretty sure of themselves, and that creates a lot of confusion in the public. But anyway, that was me commenting on it. But Mathieu, what are your two favorites?
Yeah, my two favorites would be the one advertisement from Adidas in France regarding the new Stan Smith that was supposed to be a 50% recycled, and mostly with so the claim itself was not really clear. The consumer could not know the exact proportion of the shoe that is made from recycled materials, whether plastic or other materials. But the main issue regarding this ad, and you can find this logo in the stores, in Adidas stores, it's a logo with the shape of the earth saying "end plastic waste," meaning with Adidas, in buying those shoes, we will end plastic waste. So it's a very big problem because those shoes are not recyclable at the end of life. So this is totally misleading the public. So that's the first one, and because it's a huge brand and known all over the world. And the second one is also it's from Volotea, an air travel company, and their slogan was it was a kind of a concours. I don't know how you say that in English. And the ad was saying, "I would love to connect with nature. Please fly me directly to Lyon, Vienne, Milan, etc." And you could pick up your destination. Even if you were living in Paris, you could take an airplane to go to Lyon. So you see, and it was about reconnecting with nature. Take a plane to do that. And so to me, it's a very good example of the non-understanding of all our issues, and that firstly, taking a plane is a problem, is very impactful. But talking about nature, about reconnecting with nature in taking a plane, this is something that it says to me, wow, you don't understand at all what we are facing today.
Two very clear examples. So, and I will, of course, put all the links to these different examples and rulings in the show notes, as usual, with all the other references that you shared. And now, I'd like to share an experience that many of you have already done, I guess, or not many of you, but some of you have already done. If you're based in France, or if you're not based in France, but you use a VPN with a French IP address, you just land on the Google homepage and you will see a statement, a link to what we do when it comes to sustainability, and a link to the sustainability strategy page. If you do the very same exercise with a US IP address, or actually from quite a lot of other parts in the world, you will see a very different claim, exactly the same font being used, exactly the same place in the homepage, which is carbon neutral since 2007. And of course, the reason is that recent laws in France prevent such claims without strong backing. And I found it a beautiful example of what is coming from many companies with the legal framework, the legal regulation, the new regulations, and the legal environment that they will be facing more and more. So, Harriet, Mathieu, maybe could you highlight the main developments? Where does it happen? Is it mostly in Europe, in the US, in Asia, some other places in the world as well? And what are the main regulations that companies should be aware of right now, existing or coming?
So I'm not a legal expert. I'll start by saying that. But, I think to understand this space, you do have to understand a little bit of the legal kind of background. So, forgive me, the legal experts out there. I am a comms person trying to explain it simply. So what we've got is this rapidly changing landscape. The EU has released a kind of essentially a roadmap, a directive that's kind of showing the direction of travel. And this kind of direction of travel is essentially one that means that there's going to be stronger and stronger and more precise kind of regulations around greenwashing. And the way that they've done it means that they've set a direction of travel, which is that things like kind of vague and misleading terms. You talked about the carbon neutral one there, which I would absolutely challenge anyone to define what carbon neutral really means and tell me what methodology there is for kind of getting there. And of course, those kind of vague terms, that's exactly what they're designed to do, and that's exactly why they're misleading and confusing. So those kind of terms will not be allowed. there's individual countries will need to adapt this direction of travel to their own kind of countries and to their own legal systems. So obviously we will have different interpretations and different enforcement across Europe, but organizations do really need to be kind of looking at this space and listening to what the communications that are coming out from the EU, and we will, we're all waiting for them to kind of firm up. In the UK, what we are seeing is actually, the ASA and the CMA are starting to actually kind of define where they're going through these kind of landmark rulings. There have been several recently that are kind of setting a precedent for where we think they're going. And I used the HSBC example before of, organisations who are, of them kind of signalling that they are kind of crack down on organisations who are spotlighting particular, kind of green things, whilst ignoring the rest of the kind of, the product life cycle or the usage life cycle, for example. And there was a recent ruling around Shell, which, I think everyone in my kind of climate social circle was very happy to see, where again they're signalling that this kind of greenwashing from fossil fuel companies just isn't going to be allowed. They're talking about kind of much stronger fines and much stronger enforcement around that. So it is a really kind of big business risk for organisations. But what we know today is that it's going to look different across different markets. The US continues to, with the political developments in the US, so Republicans have majority control of the House. We're seeing, I don't think we're seeing an appetite for leadership there, frankly. We've got many organisations that work in the mis and disinformation space are being asked to provide huge amounts of documents to the kind of the US political system. So I still see Europe as leading in this space. Kind of close markets such as the UK keeping a very keen eye on what's happening and probably kind of copying and using some of that. And I see markets like the States, kind of being laggards.
Mathieu, would you like to comment on this one?
My questions now regarding this hardening of the regulatory framework in France, in Europe, and abroad is it's a good thing to have new rules and hard law tackling climate change, but the issue is what resources will be available to enforce the law, both on financial and human resources. And for instance, in France, this the neutrality claim is now strictly framed, but I can still see those claims in packaging for bottled water, for example, and I don't know whether the directorate in charge of protecting the consumers are willing to fight against that and to make the law being applied. So that's a question for me. At the European level, they are talking about having claims and labels to be checked by an independent and accredited verifier. And I don't know how this will be done. You have a very big number of companies that are communicating about their engagements, etc. And does that mean that every single claim will have to be checked by an independent party? And which one? And how much this will cost? So that's a very important sign that is sent by the European Union that greenwashing is not an option and that it's a drawback to the fight against climate change and against transition. So it's important to fight it. But I'm waiting to see the final text and how it will be applied and followed by all the authorities.
Quick comment on this, because A, you're right. I mean, you need to have some resources to check and the willingness to check. I mean, I've discovered very recently that less than 10% of the French companies that are now legally required by law to disclose their carbon emissions have been fined because the Ministry of Economy is still in educational mode. I'm sure that a lot of the other French taxpayers will enjoy knowing that they can be in educational mode, because most of the time they're not with us. But that's me being maybe too populist. So sorry about that. But I was really upset when I saw that. And the second stuff is, like, if you don't provide resources, I mean, this controlling body, if you've got like 20 civil servants to deal with 1 million claims per year, obviously that's also a very efficient way for nothing to happen. But do you have also some ideas about the level of the fine? Because, I mean, GDPR, for instance, really changed the game, because for the very first time, we were talking about real money. But not real money for Facebook or Google, because 4% is still small potatoes for them. But like, for a lot of big tech companies, getting a huge fine, which is a percentage of your revenues, that's something very serious. That's a very tangible risk. Do you know something about the potential fine on greenwashing?
We had examples from the past, the recent past. In Italy, for example, Eni was fined 5 million euros because of misleading claims. And in the Netherlands last year, H&M and Decathlon had to pay 400,000 and 500,000 euros to NGOs to avoid being sued by the authority in charge of protecting consumers. So that can be huge amounts, and that's another interesting point regarding the regulation, is that NGOs will be more and more entitled to sue big companies.
Yeah, that's a very positive message, at least for the B2C sector and the B2B company which have some kind of public visibility, because then the B2B sector is not really the one that the NGO will go after, because they need also some publicity to keep the ball rolling. But yeah, but still a very positive signal indeed. Okay, so I learned a lot during this episode, and actually I learned very tangible stuff that I think I will apply with some of my clients and partners. So thanks a lot for that. Maybe one final question to both of you, Harriet and Mathieu. You shared a lot of resources. We will put them in the show notes. I've already mentioned that. Do you want to add one or two podcasts, books, articles, thought leaders that you believe people should follow when it comes to greenwashing? And I would say, on a more positive note, responsible communication.
Sure. This is such a rapidly developing area. For anyone that is on the kind of the greenwashing front, ACT is kind of hosted within an organisation called Media Bounty. It's an ethical ad organisation. We are doing a series of kind of thought leadership pieces about navigating greenwash. So go to Media Bounty's website, and there's an event coming up in London on the 29th as well for anyone that's based there. I do think that it is really worth following the rulings of some of these kind of bodies. So, going to the ASA's websites and looking at rulings around greenwash. I think looking at organisations. So if you're a kind of working in advertising and comms, and you want to look at ways of doing things well, there's a community of people called Clean Creatives, Creatives for Climate, of which who have have a network, and it's a network of practitioners who are sharing good practice, sharing bad practice, and looking at how they can support each other. So, I think if you're working in this space and you want to be connected to a community, I would definitely go to Creatives for Climate and have a look at what's on there.
I would like to point out a really good newsletter dedicated to the fight against greenwashing. The name is The Crisps, and it's a newsletter made by Lavinia Mutt and Tanita Hecking. And these are two girls working in the marketing and communication sector, especially in the apparel industry. And they are sending to you one newsletter per month, and two if you buy the pro format of the newsletter. And that's really good crispy content, very good content regarding greenwashing.
Thanks a lot, Mathieu and Harriet, for joining Green.io and sharing all these new references on top of the others. I hope that you will keep on carrying the torch of responsible communication as high as possible. And I do hope that Green.io will help you carrying it a bit higher after the release of the episode. Thanks a lot.
Oh, thanks so much, Gaël, and thanks for everyone for listening. It's been great.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this Green.io episode. In episode 24, we talk about IT sustainability in software as a service companies with Thérèse Gaillet, the lead author of the Sustainability Guide for Salesforce Technology, and Nicholas Sundberg, the author of Sustainable IT Playbook for Technology Leaders. Stay tuned. In a forthcoming episode, we will talk about data for good with Anastasis Stamis, Lou Velgrin, and Theo Alves da Costa. You can drop a question in an Apple review of the podcast, and we'll do our best to answer it. And before you leave, a small message from our sponsor. No, I'm kidding. Green.io is a free and independent podcast, and so we need your help to keep it that way. You can help us by supporting us on Tipeee. The link is in the episode notes. I also give online and on-site conferences and facilitate workshops about climate change and digital sustainability, so do get in touch if that interests you. It's a good way to allow me to keep investing in the podcast. Full disclosure, each episode takes me roughly 15 hours of work, finding the guests, convincing them, researching the topic, etc. And it costs between 300 and 400 euros to produce. So now you know. But if you cannot donate, that's fine. You can support us by spreading the word. Rate the podcast 5 stars on Apple and Spotify. Ask a friend to do it too. Each vote is worth 1,000 likes on YouTube, believe me. Sharing an episode on social media or directly with a relative is also more effective than many ads. Seriously, thanks for your support. It means a lot to us. Us being me, but also Tani Levitt, our amazing podcast producer, and Gilles Tellier, our amazing podcast curator. And stay tuned by subscribing to our Green.io monthly newsletter to be launched in October, but the link is already in the episode notes. But you already know the drill. You will get carefully curated contents, episode wrap-ups, and exclusive articles. It is as free and independent as the podcast itself, and it aims to help you, responsible technologists, build a greener digital world, one bite at a time.